First, Ushemikud, Kudushabihu, Ushihinte. Mi'u or Imulahat, Shemika Biloke. Yiddish Shem Guzrael Kolam in. Okay, we're starting. It's on? Okay. I welcome everybody with love. We are sharing this from Almog, near the Dead Sea, as we're doing our spiritual fasting retreat. And it's time to talk about holistic detox. And the concept of holistic detox is detoxing on every level: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. And that's the idea. It isn't just a physical detox. And one of the things of us to begin thinking about, because I'm going to be talking about the principles of this instead of all the details. So instead of looking for cures, it's better to stop creating disease. Now that's an interesting way to think about it, because we're always thinking about cures or, saviors, but really, let's stop creating disease. That's more of a simple approach, but it's very holistic in its way. What is disease? Disease is a crisis of toxicity, okay? And if we understand disease as chaos in the system, you begin to understand what's going on in our society, in our world. We're having chaos in the system, and disease is the result. How do you heal that? You bring order back into the system. That's how that works. So the key then is, how do we bring order back into our lives on the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual levels? Okay? And that's what we're doing with the spiritual fast. It's a way of restoring the order. That's how simple it is when you get it. But when you get it at that level of simplicity, it really starts to make a lot of sense of how to go about it. So we can look at fasting as it's a way of combating illness. Okay? And as Hippocrates said, to eat when you're ill is to feed your illness. So generally speaking, you want to fast when you are feeling ill. That's the way to look at it. Now, there's another really important concept with this, is the word innervation. And that means it's a depletion of our power to actually detox. Cells have a certain power. Our organs have a certain power. And it's a depletion of that power. And that's what we're looking at there, is that when we feel depleted that way, that's what we call innervated. Okay? Proper innervation versus de-innervation is what happens normally. Our bodies are designed to detox. Our bodies are really designed to take care of what's happening to ourselves, how we're eating, and so forth. In our world today, there's a slight problem, is that there's massive levels of toxicity that makes it much harder for us. That's part of the issue, and our lifestyles are more toxic than ever before in history. So that's why we have to do things like fast to aid our fundamental detox system. I would almost propose that if we weren't so living in such a toxic environment, living such toxic lifestyles, we probably wouldn't have to fast. I'll put it that way. It doesn't matter who you are, even if you're on a 100% live food diet, there's this constant issue because we're living in such a toxic soup. Okay? So now we got to look at the causes of the innervation. And that is the depletion of the vital force energy. When we fast, we build up the vital life force energy, and that makes all the difference in the world. Okay? It naturally starts to return because we're taking away the stressors that deplete the vital life force energy. And we're talking not just physical stressors, but we're really talking about emotional stressors and mental and spiritual stressors. That's what we're talking about. And kind of extending it, we can say a fast is abstaining from physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual toxicity. That's the secret of fasting, is we abstain from all that. That's why it's really good to be on a retreat when you have the ability to back off from these things. Of course, sometimes we take them with us, but the idea is it's a chance to back off from that.
Sorry, one second.
Okay. So, what are those, and how do we go about backing off from it? We're having some technical difficulties. Can we bring this to the closer?
Oh, that fixed it.
Okay. Magic. Okay. So, what's the treatment for innervation? Detoxification. That's the main concept that's important. So, and it's detoxing on all the levels. There's a tremendous amount of environmental toxins that we face. We have radiation from Fukushima and Chernobyl. We have constant bombardment of chemtrails. And there's lots of serious toxins in chemtrails. That's a topic all in itself, which I've talked about before, so we're going to hold on that, because there's a lot of toxins with chemtrails that we have to deal with. The pesticides, herbicides that are in our environment, that are in our food, even if you're eating organic, it just means you'll have 1/4 to 1/6 of the amount of pesticides and herbicides. It doesn't mean it's all gone. I think that's the important thing. Then we have GMO foods, which are seriously toxic. They've been associated with diabetes, cancer, heart disease, pretty much all the different chronic diseases that we're looking at. GMOs are there. Sometimes, like with cancer, it's more hardcore evidence, but generally we're seeing it. And also in terms of infertility, it seems that the GMOs are connected to significant increases in fertility. I mean, these are big problems. In Argentina, we found that they're reporting that women are having 100 times more spontaneous abortions, about 2 to 5 times more congenital defects in their babies. So it's not really a good situation, even though we press for it, and it's lower quality food. So I'm bringing another concept, which is we're paying more to get less. Genetically engineered food actually gives us less. There's no evidence whatsoever that it increases food production. Some people feel maybe it's less, but at best it's break even. So, but it does achieve undermining our health, and we have to do things about that. And now some things we have to do by avoiding. So they say you want to avoid toxicity. Well, how do you do it? Don't eat GMO food. That's real simple. It's not that complicated. It's hard to undo it once you've done it. We have smart meters and all kinds of EMF pollution. We can do things about that. But it's hard. The environmental toxicity really requires we build up our fields pretty strongly to make it work, and we have to do a lot of avoidance to do that. So that's the kind of overview of what we're having to face there. Now, EMFs today are a big problem, and I don't want to. We can speak hours on it. There are some very simple things we can do.
You tell what is EMF?
Electromagnetic fields. Okay? And these, particularly as we move to 5G, become a bigger and bigger problem. We see, the research shows, a great increase in cancer, particularly in children, particularly when they're holding their cell phone next to their heads. There's a lot more brain tumors and parotid gland tumors. Okay, very real. What do? Well, first move, avoid. Minimize your use of cell phones. Always keep the cell phones different, distinct from you. There are things like that. We can, I'm not going to go into all the technical things we can do, but there's a lot we can do to block the EMFs. Okay, but it isn't exactly the topic that we're going to right now. The mental causes of stress are very significant, and it's us. Each 10 years, people double the amount of stress that they experience. So we have ways to detox from the stress. We have meditation. We have exercise. There are different things we can do to minimize the mental stress. But preventatively, we need to look at our lifestyle and make choices that bring us back to a natural way of living so we aren't creating the stress. So we don't have to de-stress. And that's eating a really good meal, eating good food, but living a lifestyle that brings us into harmony with our life. That we're living with the rhythm of life rather than combating the rhythm of life that is really going on. Another level is the spiritual causes. And part of why the spiritual fast is so important is we help us reconnect with the truth of who we are. In our busyness, in our outward going, we lose touch with the divine, that spark of the divine within us. And that creates all kinds of imbalances. So it's returning to our sacred design, returning to a way of life that helps us stay in touch with that spark of the divine within us. And more than that, become a flame of the divine. So those are the key things to understand. There are a variety of causes for this. I kind of break it down into the culture of life and spiritual unfoldment as a way of life versus the culture of death, which is pretty much the predominant culture that's happening in today's world. It's a whole lifestyle choice that we have, okay? And we can talk about it symbolically. We have the tree of knowledge, good and evil. and we have the tree of life. What are we going to choose? It's our choice. What are we going to choose to make that work? We can have dead food, junk food, pesticide herbicided food, or we can choose to eat a vegan live food. It makes a huge difference. It's our choice. These things really, really help us a lot. When we return to the natural way of living, it really moves us out of better living through chemistry. And we kind of have better living through better living, or we have better living through chemistry. Take a drug. You got a problem? Take a drug. Well, I'm not. I'm going to touch only a little bit on how false that is. It doesn't really work. All the psychiatric drugs have not been proven to significantly work in any way. You can get a 15% improvement, but that's equal to placebo. But they do cause what I'm going to call mental perturbations. In other words, it disorganizes the mind. It actually has a toxic effect on brain function, and kills a certain amount of brain cells in different structures. There's a huge body of literature on that. And unfortunately, particularly in young teenage boys, it tends to increase the rate of homicide and suicide, which we're seeing kind of around with the school shootings and things like that. That is actually coming up. They're actually mentioning that kind of thing. And it's a lot of validity. The research, when I was training a psychiatrist, that was coming out was these psych meds were like increasing suicide, homicide by 3 to 4 times. Now they're saying it's 2 to 3 times. It's still a lot. Still a lot. Better living through better living means you have good nutrition and you take supplements, and that is a very effective way of healing the brain, not suppressing and distorting it. So those are things that these are cultural choices. Are we going to live in harmony with the planet? Or are we going to destroy the resources of the planet? These are kind of things that goes on. Genetic engineering, or eating genetically engineered food, or whole organic food. So we actually have choices. At this moment, we have some control over our personal lives at this point. We may have to stand up to maintain that control, but that's the battle that for freedom you always have to do that. There's never a time you don't have to stand up. And in this case, standing up for healthy, organic food may be a bottom line for people. So the other issue that helps us live a healthy life is to activate our life. Live in a way that we get joy from life rather than try to suppress our life because it's so not fun. So we need to look at that. How do we live in a way that uplifts the quality of life for us? So these are just some of the ideas that we're talking about. If we're going to sum it up in a certain way, the culture of death, we're looking for saviors and cures. In the culture of life, we're really looking to stop building disease. Stop creating toxicity. That's what we're talking about. Those are real choices that we make. How we live on all those levels. Now, there are some key principles that I want to talk about. First, as I mentioned, is activating the vital life force. Innervation is when we don't have enough vital life force in our cells to throw off the toxins. when we fast and do all the things we do with the fast, with the yoga and the meditation and so forth, we build up the vital life force so the cells literally are empowered to throw out the toxins. It's that simple when you kind of see it. So I want to give an overview of what that's about. That's the first thing. Now, there's another principle called diffusion. And what diffusion is when toxins go from higher points of concentration to lower points. So when you do an enema, when you do a colonic, you're running a lot of water through, and it's pulling the toxins by the law of diffusion out of the colon, because you're going from higher sources of toxicity to lower, so the toxins are pulled out. So that's another way to understand the law of diffusion in that. And then I've already mentioned emotional, mental, and spiritual detoxification. That's a work that we do with meditation and reviewing our life about what are we going to do about our life? What are we going to do here? And there's a variety of non-invasive procedures, from saunas, okay, to certain kinds of ways of sending frequencies in the body that help heal. And we have massage. There's a lot of things we can do to aid the big picture. So that's activating the vital life force, and then with diffusion. And then once we get past diffusion, we look at the mental part, and finally, non-invasive cellular energy that we've been talking about. So those are the four kind of avenues to understand about how we can go about with the detoxification. We try to touch on all four of them at the fast in different ways. So that's kind of key in that. And the non-invasive, is different body energy, not just massage, but non-invasive kind of body energy work, Reiki work, things like that. I'll do that. My experience in doing this with this approach is we increase the ability to detoxify somewhere between 200 and 400 times. Just the fast alone has an amazing positive effect in getting rid of toxins. So I've measured in a variety of ways, and it really does make a difference. Now, what I want to go into is a little bit about physical detox a little bit, and help us understand a little bit about bowel toxicity, which is very, very fundamental in the whole thing. Okay? And first, we look at enemas, colonics, and they help clear out the fecal matter, but that's just step one. The next step is they pull out what I call the toxic bacteria. The dysbiosis, which is named for toxic bacteria, if it's more than 15%, actually begins to have a toxic effect on your whole body, including your brain function. And they knew about this in the early 1900s. It's really fascinating that when people would be brought in the mental hospitals around the turn of the 19th century, they would give them a colonic to start with. They actually understood the bowel-brain connection, which is quite real. And now we're understanding it in a different way. If you have a healthy bowel, you're going to have healthy bowel bacteria, and those healthy bowel bacteria, people are estimating, produces about 2/3 of the neurotransmitters in the body. And the brain is maybe producing about 1/3. So the healthy bowel is going to put forth a very healthy arrangement of neurotransmitters that improve the functioning of your brain. That's interesting. So it's extremely important that we create a healthy bowel. And that's part of what we're doing in this spiritual fast. We're meditating, but we're also going the other way, cleaning the bowel, and then we will be putting back a whole lot of healthy bacteria in the bowel. Now, there's one little caveat here. The healthiest bacteria is what you already have. And that's eating in a way to include prebiotics. What are prebiotics? Prebiotics are what feed the probiotics, which are the bacteria. And there's certain prebiotic foods that are very good. Asparagus and broccoli are some of them. Tomatoes are actually a very powerful prebiotic. Some of the leafy greens are good. And they feed and nourish your healthy bacteria so they begin to flourish and put out all kinds of good neurotransmitters and other things that they do, like prevent us from getting diabetes. So it's very significant that we take very, very good care of our bowel. And that's kind of one of the most important messages here. And I'm going to just stay with detoxification of the bowel as a really key piece of the story. But I just want to get the overview again, so let's not forget it. We're talking a multidimensional detox. Physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual detox is the big part of the story. And we do look at a 100% vegan live food diet. We look at yoga, we look at exercise, we look at meditation, we look at breathing exercises. These are all things that support it. But where we're going now is to talk a little bit about the autotoxicity. Okay? It's a topic we haven't directly talked about until now. So autotoxicity is when the pathogenic bacteria in your bowel are giving off toxins that affect your mental, emotional, and physical state. So in 1917, Settle and Eldridge published a paper talking about 518 cases where people had significant mental difficulties, paranoia, particularly depression, mental confusion, things like that. And they showed that when you clear the bowel, when you treat the bowel toxicity, those symptoms, quote, diseases went away. We didn't need to treat them with psychopharmacological things that don't really work. Clear the bowel. Very, very important. Anthony Basler in 1933 cites 5,000 cases, but he also talks about sciatica, sinus problems, muscle aches and pains, arthritis, just a whole series of physical problems, as well as the mental problems of depression, anxiety, and so forth. So it's all about the bowel toxicity. That's a huge way to go about healing these super common things that people are facing today, taking all these over-the-counter drugs and so forth. So that's something to really think about, and again, the symptoms are like fatigue and nervousness, anxiety, mental confusion. Does that sound familiar? And then you're looking at the higher rate of Alzheimer's, where 50% of people 85 or older have Alzheimer's, and you look at the younger onset of Alzheimer's, this is all bowel toxicity, bowel brain toxicity. So we kind of look at that in a bigger way. You know, allergies are connected to it as well, a very common thing. One thing that people aren't aware of is cardiac arrhythmias. And when you do bowel toxicity cleaning, there's a body of research that shows these cardiac arrhythmias can go away. That's certainly not the only cause. It's a possible cause. Okay? So this is a key understanding in how we can go about this. Now, the next question is, bowel toxins are not a metaphor. They really do exist. Okay? And there's a variety of them that we see. But I want to give this Anthony Basler quote first. He says, every physician should realize that the intestinal toxemias are the most important, primary, and contributing causes to many disorders and diseases of the human body. So they cracked the code to a certain extent on that. And the bowel toxins come out of the bowel and they get absorbed in the blood and the lymph and so forth. So what are some? One is ammonia, which is from the breakdown of excess undigested protein. Now, when we look at the whole thing in terms of toxicity, it appears that a high animal protein diet and a lot of excess simple carbohydrates seem to be the most important causes, because those carbohydrates create a lot of fermentation in the system. Okay? So that's a key to understand. So ammonia is one. That can get real serious. You can get mentally, you can go even into a coma from the ammonia excess that's there. Clostridium is a tendency for a particular bacterial infection that people get. Now, indole is one of the major bowel toxins. I have measured indican in the bowel, and after days, which comes out of indole. And what I found is that by day 6 or 7 of the fast, the indican disappears from the urine, meaning we've pretty much cleared the bowel toxins. That is why I really insist on a 7-day fast, because we know by that time, based on my research, that we are clearing the bowel toxins. So that's actually a really, really important thing to get. It takes 6 or 7 days. 3 days is not enough to do that. And that's with doing the enemas and everything else. So indole is a really important poison. Indican is what we were talking about measuring. Again, it's a very important toxin. Phenols. Now, we kind of know that they're poisons, but they also get created by the bowel toxicity of the bacteria, of the pathogenic bacteria, in the breakdown of the different food products. So scatols are another breakdown. They also give the smell to the bowel. Now, how important are scatols? Well, what the Russians found is that with schizophrenia, there's 6 times more 5-hydroxyscatol. And that's when they put people who are incurable schizophrenics on a water fast for 28 days, that cleared. in 65% of the people. And it only came back when people began eating meat again. When they didn't eat meat, which is where the scatol comes from, is a bacterial breakdown, then they didn't get the schizophrenia returning. So that gives us an insight to at least one level of schizophrenia. It's connected more directly to bowel toxins. So there's a few other very real biotoxins, mercaptan, pertusine, caverine, tryptamine. These are all very real things that we look at. Histamine is another one. So the point is, these are real. They come from bacteria that are pathogenic, and they affect every organ in our system, but in particular, they affect the brain. So our job is, how do we prevent that from happening? First, we avoid overeating and creating fermentation, and we have a lower carbohydrate, really lower protein diet. Fat, plant fat seems to be really good on many levels for us in terms of avoiding these toxicities, and it's a very good source of energy as well. And going vegan is a very, very important way to minimize the bowel toxicity. Taking it a step further, going at least, trying to do 80% live food. And then we have to take our toxic lifestyles seriously. We want to organize our life to minimize emotional, mental, and spiritual stresses and toxicity, because all those innervate us, and our systems lose our ability to throw off mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical. Now, I think it's pretty obvious with the physical toxicity, but think about it. When you're really fatigued, how well can you deal with mental stresses? Not as well. Our capacity goes down. That is innervation. That's what I'm talking about. So it's very practical. So in kind of concluding this talk on toxicity, multidimensional toxicity, the real message is, let's look at our lives, which is what this spiritual fast is about, of how we can minimize creating toxicity in our life on all four levels. And another side of that is how we can live in a way that maximizes our vital life force. So may everyone be blessed with this understanding and empowered with it. Blessings to everyone.